Hello everyone and welcome to a most interesting game also from the Biel Chess Festival. However, this is the Challenger section and it is round 1. Danish Grandmaster Jonas Buhl Bjerre faces Indian Grandmaster Vaishali, and it's really a wild game. So many possible knight jumps, so many forks, so many... I mean, it's really impossible to calculate. You guys will love it. And to make matters more interesting, they will be following a game played between Magnus and Fabiano Caruana from last year's Norway Chess, where Fabiano just obliterated Magnus. It was less than 30 moves miniature, as I recall. So let's check it out. Jonas with white opens with pawn to e4. Vaishali replies with e6. The French defense is on the board. We have d4, d5, and knight to c3. We have knight to f6 and e5, challenging the classical variation with the Steinitz approach. Pawn to e5, knight f to d7, and pawn to f4. We have pawn to c5, knight f3, and knight to c6. We've had this many times. Many people play this. Bishop to e3, and now pawn to a6. I always like to mention that if you reach this position, some of your opponents might go for queen to b6 to put pressure on the newly undefended b2 pawn, but it's not nothing relevant. You can just attack the queen. The knight also defends the pawn, and after the queen gives a check and it seems like you're going to lose a knight, you can play c3, and your knight is nicely defended, and you can go b4 next, and so on. The black queen will not have a great time playing this game. So it is much more customary to go a6 here, and now knight to e2. Now this is queen to d2 is by far the most played move here. Other ideas are something like a3, bishop to e2, and knight to e2. Knight to e2 is what Jonas goes for. Queen to b6 now, putting pressure on the b2 pawn, but really putting pressure on the center, and queen to c1, nicely defending the b2 pawn. We have bishop to e7, pawn to c3, and castles kingside. We have pawn to g3 and pawn to f6, much like in the game Magnus Carlsen versus Fabiano Caruana from last year's Norway Chess. And in that game, Fabi played bishop to g2 and won very nicely. But here we have bishop to h3. I will even put a link to that game if you haven't seen it. First link in the description below. So bishop to h3, and it is now as of move 12 that we have a completely new game. So the e6 pawn is hanging, and Vaishali plays c captures on d4. She spent some 20 minutes on this, so obviously she decided that bishop captures on e6 was not really relevant. But okay, your bishop is also hanging, so you might as well recapture. C captures, and now f captures on e5. But what's the idea now behind sacrificing the e6 pawn? Well, we should explore this, definitely. If bishop captures on e6 check, okay, you have to move the king to h8. And now let's say you play d captures on e5. It looks very nice. You win a pawn. You're also attacking the black queen. But bishop c5, and you can resign. Why, you might ask? Well, your bishop on e3 is hanging, and now look at this. If you capture, knight captures, now there's a double attack on the bishop on e6, and once you capture, there's knight d3 check with the first royal fork of this game that we are going to show. So that's only one of the reasons why you cannot do it. So d captures on e5 is played, just opening up an attack towards Vaishali's queen, bishop to c5, and now a simple trade. Captures, captures, and queen to e3. We have knight to b4, again threatening the royal fork here. With knight c2 check, we'll fork the king, the queen, and the rook. Knight f to d4, guarding the c2 square, and now knight b to d3 with check, preventing the white king from castling. King f1, and queen captures on b2. And what do you think about this position? Well, the engine even likes white here, believe it or not. Not by a lot. Okay, the evaluation is probably equal, but says that white might be having a little bit of an edge here. We have king to g2, trying to get the rook into the game, and now queen to a3. Knight to b3, offering a trade, and now pawn to b6. And the problem is, well, if you play something like knight captures on c5, there's knight captures on f4 check, and you lose your queen. That's the problem. So what you could do here is a rook h to f1. This is very nice. Or rook h to b1, also very nice. But here we have rook h to d1. And now knight to b2. We have rook d to c1. The rook here is hanging. Rook d to c1. And now knight back to c4, attacking the white queen. Queen to c3. And now rook to a7. Other moves are possible. You could go after the white queen right away, or further expand on the queen side with pawn to b5. Vaishali goes for rook to a7. And now knight e to d4. Safest here is knight captures on c5, and then you bring the knight to d4. But here knight e to d4 was played keeping the tension. And now knight e4 attacks the white queen, queen to d3, and now rook to c7. And it seems like Vaishali is just mounting the attack without Jonas being able to put up any sort of resistance here. Plus the e6 pawn is still hanging, but what you shouldn't do is capture it. You should play king to g1. The king is too vulnerable on g2. However, Jonas plays bishop captures on e6. He's already losing a lot of time. He spent some 7 minutes on this move, but now Vaishali's position is completely winning. With king to g1, there's still a fighting chance. Bishop captures, knight captures, rooks are being forked here, but queen to b2 with check, gaining access to the f2 square. And now the real problem is you don't have rook to c2. If you had rook c2, then it's perfectly fine, but you don't, because here you have knight to e3 check, nicely connecting with the rook on c2. So you have to capture, and now after rook captures on c2, it's the very simple king hunt. For example, king f3, rook to f3 with check, king g4, h5 with check, king captures, rook captures with check, let's say king g4, and queen g2 with queen h3. The white king will get checkmated here. Of course, queen f3 is mate in 1. If you try something like rook to g1, then you just go after the white king, and now you don't have a move. You have to play g4, and now it's merely a matter of queen h3 check and delivering that checkmate. So that's the problem. So you cannot block with the rook. You have to play knight to d2. And now knight c captures on d2, preparing a very nasty discovery. And while you don't want to capture either rook here, there's really no better move. Knight captures on c7 by Jonas, knight to f1, opening up a nice discovery. And if the knight is captured, then queen to f2 is checkmate. So the king has to start running. Or you block with the rook now. Rook to c2. Now comes knight to e3 check. Again, with a similar variation that we've just shown. And if the queen captures, then you can just capture on c2. And to make matters worse, after the king moves anywhere, you can, knight to f2 check is very nice, but also you can just take the free piece, and that's just it. So after knight e3 check, king to f3 is played, but now knight captures on c2. We have rook to d1. It seems that you cannot deliver this royal fork here, but that's exactly what Vaishali does. Knight to e1 with check, and this allows the queen access to the f2 square. Rook captures on e1. Queen to f2 check, king to g4, and now you could go for h5, of course it's possible, but she just captures the rook, and the white king cannot survive on g4. Even queen captures on d5 with check is allowed, king to h8, and now there's no good way for Jonas to continue. With best defense, Vaishali is checkmating him in 12 moves. If the knight was, for example, on these two squares, then knight f7 would be a victory for white, but on c7, not so much. Knight to e6 is played, but now Vaishali starts checking. Queen to e2 check, we have king to h3, knight to f2 with check. King to g2, knight to d1 with check, we have king h3, and now queen to h5 with check. And he was in this position on move 39 that Jonas Buhl resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Only move is king g2, and that will be met with, queen e2 can force a mate in 4, but you can also just pick up the white queen, and that's pretty much it. You don't have to calculate. But for those of you who appreciate a good brute force calculation, queen e2 check, king to h3, and knight to e3 gets the job done. Now you have to give up the queen, even though there's no real good way to do it, but there's no defense against queen to h5 checkmate. Or you play pawn to g4 and then queen captures on g4 is checkmate. That will also work. Or queen to g4 right away. There's just no escape here. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely played by both of them, but it is Vaishali who takes the win here. And yeah, like I said, I can't remember the last time we had so many not just potential forks, but also actual forks in a chess game. So hope you enjoyed this one. So yeah, I would like to thank Kevin O'Grady, Rajashri Chowdhury, James Eugene Cashman, BulletChessThriller.com, and Peter I. Bilic for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous these videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, but also whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.